Jazz Felipe here. Thanks so much for joining me. Today, I decided to put out together this video after a couple of weeks ago, I bought another pressing of a record that I truly like, a collector record. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and that make me go through Blue Note labels. Sometimes it's easy, very recognizable, but sometimes they can be kind of tricky. And I try to put together like a quick guide reference. By no means I feel like I'm an expert on labels, of especially Blue Note. There's so much history behind it, and there's so many experts out there. So I highly recommend you go check the London Jazz Collector. Is a very comprehensive guide on labels that you can find online, or the best, the ultimate, is Fred Cohen's book that you can find through the Jazz Record Center in New York website, which is very, very detailed, record by record, series by series. It's the most detailed. If you want to be able to identify, understand, date, and have fun with the Blue Note labels, their history, what's behind the releases, it's a very fun reading, deep, and has a lot of knowledge for you there. And also on YouTube, you can find other videos on the subject by Kim McAuliffe, 10-minute record reviews, just basement. There are tons of videos out there. I'm just gonna add my 10 cents to it, and hopefully you guys can find it enjoying. So the whole thing started. I mean, I always been into looking at the runouts, the details on the labels. I collect OGs as much as I can. I think it's a fun piece of history. I truly love it. But a few weeks ago, I bought another called the Blue Train, and Blue Train is one of the hardest records to date, identify. There's so many details and things to look at and observe. I still don't have a first pressing of Blue Train. I wish I had. I have a few, and they all sound terrific. It's a really well recorded record, in my opinion. But first, let's go through a little bit of the history of the labels. So Blue Note, as everybody knows, it starts in 1939, mostly cutting shellacs, 10 inches, 7 inches, and in the 50s enters the micro groove era and the 1500 series, which is the dearest to me. I think some of my favorite records are there. Some of the really heavy hitters, pieces of history and music are there. So I'm going to start by the 1500 series. So from 1951 to 57, Blue Note had used a label. The first labels here, I'm going to give an example. It is with a Lexington Avenue address. And also those records, they have a deep groove. There's a deep groove here. And some things to look for in the run out. Okay. So interestingly, also in the label, there's no R or ink. There's just Lexington Avenue, a deep groove here. And in the run out, you're going to find the serial number. You're going to find the P for Plastilite, which is to make these records. And you're going to find Van Gelder, RVG. In the very first one, it's going to be hand carved, like on this one. This one is a hand carved RVG, not stamped yet. And there's going to be a 9M. 9M was likely to be the client number at the pressing plant. So Blue Note was 9M, and for example, I think I saw Prestige was like 7E or something like this. They had identifiers for each label, so they would know where they come from. However, these identifiers, they're not standard. They don't happen across the board, which is a very interesting thing. Show how artisanal things used to run. First half of the 50s, those records used to weigh about 220 grams, 200 grams. So if you have a kitchen scale, again, very easy for you to kind of date them. So this is a very first one, 257 Lexington. This is BLP 1518, or Silver and the Jazz Messengers. After Lexington, there's a variation here. They change the address. They go to 47 West 63rd, New York 23. So this is 1534. I think you guys can see here the RVG there, the serial number, the P, everything 9M, everything is also here, along with the deep groove around in the inner rim. Okay, so this record here is 1534 Paul Chamber Sextet. It's a beautiful copy, which I'm really, really happy to have one. And this is the next variation, like 57, 58. Next, you have a different variation in the. Oh, and by the way, still under notes, no R or ink here. So next comes a different variation in the address. This is 1573. This is John Jenkins Ken Burrell, also an OG. 1500 series. Also has deep groove. Same identifiers, Van Gelder. Here is already stamped RVG, the P, the serial number, 9M, everything is here. And the difference in the address, it says 47 West, 63rd, New York City, note 23 after New York City. That goes from like 57, 58. Then you have another one, variation here. When they start having the R, after Blue Note gets incorporated in 58. So records after that, so they start having in the labels, they still have a deep groove, they still have the Van Gelder, they still have the serial number, the P, however, and the 9M. However, um, they lack the 23rd here, okay, and they start having R under note. There's an R here, and also say Blue Note Records Inc. after the company gets incorporated. So, for a fun fact, this is a 1959 press. It's considered a third. After that era in 61, the Blue Note enters the New York era. So the labels are the New York labels, right? Not everything is plastilite anymore, and that's when things kind of become a little fuzzy. The records are a little thinner; they're around 180 grams, and this is considered like to be the last stretch, the last run of this golden age of Blue Note. They some records have the P, sometimes some records have P on either side. Some records don't have deep groove, and the label variations. You can find New Yorks with the Lexington labels because they would press labels and covers sometimes. If the record needs a repress, they will repress the record, use the old stuff. Even after the Liberty era, after 66, they could have Liberty's label on one side, New York labels on the other side. It's kind of messy, so you have to be really careful on checking on those. So the weight is a good indicator. The P, there's one record on initial run that does not have a P, which is a 1595 Cannonball Adder with Miles Davis. That record was pressed a lot. So one of the runs has to be pressed as the Abbey manufacturing, which used to make the records for Prestige. So those records are not plastilite, but they're still considered to be originals. And also New York era marks some changes there. So when Van Gelder adopted stereo, he was recording stereo mono. He was pretty much stamping records as RVG for mono or RVG stereo for the stereos. After that, in the 60s, everything just becomes Van Gelder or Van Gelder stereo because everything's assumed to be stereo. The monos will be just fold downs. So two examples of the New York label here. This is a stereo record. It's a really nice copy of Signed Wider with the R, as you can see. Inc. New York label. And here you can still see the P, you still see Van Gelder stamped, stereo, and the P. There's no longer 9M in some of those pressings. And out of curiosity, when they were pressing monos and stereo back in those days, they would also change the catalog number. So for stereos, they would call them BSTs and add an H, so 84157. The mono would be BLT, BLP, sorry, 4157, no H and no ST. So this is a stereo OG of Signlander. And just to reinforce the mono, here will be the mono. This is an OG of Herbie Hancock taking off. So that's the mono called BLP, not BST, and starting with a 4109. And everything else matching here. The P, RVG, Van Gelder, and the serial number. Things to look for. Another few detail identifiers from the very early, like the Lexingtons, they would have a flat edge. They would not have little bump. And of course, they will be heavier. The New York, they are still around 180 grams. Then after Blue Note gets sold to Liberty, that's another transitional period. There's a lot of mixture in labels. Okay, so this is a very typical Liberty label. Division of Liberty Records. This is Hank Mobley, high voltage. Here, all the same details. The record you can already feel is a little thinner. It's around 140, 150. Van Gelder, and the serial number. Many Liberties, they don't have Van Gelder, so I'm not sure exactly who mastered those, but some do. Also, there's a different run of Liberty records here, which those are pressed on the West Coast. That's Duke Pearson, Sweet Honey Bee is a OG stereo. Also, Van Gelder, serial number on the rim. And I think it's actually a very cool label. And this one, still thin, Liberty UA, and those are pressed on the West Coast. Apparently, according to the London Jazz Collector website, they said the guys in California, they just wanted to have more freedom or kind of joke or mess around with folks in New York. So they kind of changed the labels. And it is believed that some of these records that were not, that do not have Van Gelder in the dead wax, they were mastered by house engineers back in California. Next, you have, after Liberty, they're acquired by the Transamerica Corporation. So Liberty becomes a division of United Artists. And the font changes a little bit. It's a little more sober, square. So this is Lee Morgan, his last record. You see here, okay. Division of United Artists. So, and this is still Van Gelder. Okay. Just a different style in the labels. And last but not least, I decided to stop in the 70s, not go much further. This is the record, Lee Morgan's last record. Highly recommend, highly recommend. And in the 70s, from 71 to 75, they had this blue labels with a B. Could be black or white. Again, some Van Gelder, some are not. Luckily, this is a Van Gelder. This is a black B. There are white Bs as well. Sound quality criticized by many years ago. Now these records are gaining steam, getting high in price. They were my introduction to Blue Note records, mostly those 70s pressings, and I was really glad that I got them, so they can be good for me to upgrade to new pressings, to older pressings and more historical. Also, so I'm not going much further into the 80s, 90s, and what came afterwards. Most of the represses, they just copy the original labels, of course, not with all the details, just addresses and things like that. But it's also interesting to look for them. DMM records in the mid 80s, plus Japanese and European, especially from the 70s, 60s on. They're a whole different ball game. I'm not even going to get in there. I just wanted to stick to the US pressings. So going back to my Blue Train journey, just to wrap up here. I have the issue like Tom Poets, SRXs, blah, blah, blah. They are really great playing copies, but I had this one, which is a 59. That's a third press. As I showed you guys here, it has West 63rd, Deep Groove, Van Gelder, Mono, BLP 1577, very well known. And a couple of weeks ago, I had the lucky to acquire this one, which is as clean as it gets. And I had some issue kind of dating it, finding out what was the actual pressing, the date, and everything. So they look quite similar. They both have the R. The address here looks the same. I have to say this record is a slightly, very slightly lighter. So, but it's the exact same thing. The run out is the same. The exact same run out. The labels, and then you go back to how can I date this? How can I find out about it? So first thing, in the very, very first run of Blue Train, you see this picture here, Curtis Fuller? Only in the you see there's a defect in the picture on his forehead. Only in the very first pressing, this picture is clear, is perfect. So that's an indicator that's not a first one. Second, the first and second pressings, they do not have the R or the ink on the blue note. Subsequent ones they have. And then, so these records look almost like identical, except for details in the color, the font of the John Coltrane. In the back cover, there's a difference. I'm going to show you right now. So this is it's quite interesting. This is the 59 pressing. If you look at the address here, it says for complete catalog, White to Blue Note Records Inc., 47 West 63rd Street, New York, 23, which was actually in the label. In the 61, sorry, for complete catalog, White to Blue Note Records Inc., 43rd West 61st Street. So 61st is not there. This is a 60s one. So this is a 61 pressing, a mono one. And another thing that this record is so immaculate, it came with the original inner sleeve. So by looking at the original inner sleeve, you can see the records that are being pressed at that date. So that's how I kind of figure out through looking at some of the titles available here in the 4000 series. I could date this record and precise it to a 1961 pressing, unlike that one, which is a 1959. So there's so many details, variations. Blue Train is a very special record in that sense. Sound quality is outstanding across the board. No issues with them. But just to only goes to show how those things were artisanal. They were like kind of made on a budget, but still with a high artistic quality, especially Blue Note, as we know. And it's fun to collect. It's fun to learn more about them, date, learn about the history, the stories behind the records. Just to have an idea, they would take about from recording, which was like the easiest part, to the final sales. It would take about 12 months between recording, mixing, mastering, cutting, printing everything, and releasing would take about 12 months. Plus, those records, they were released as demanded, not as recorded in a sequence. So the recordings are not necessarily in a chronological order. It would depend on market, strategy, whatever Francis Wolf and Reed Miles decided how to release them. So sometimes they would have like papers and labels sitting on the shelf, records press, records master, whatever. Oh, let's release this one this week, this one, that other one next week. So that's when things become really confusing. And I think especially after they get incorporated, after they get acquired by Liberty and then United Artists, things get really all over. So it's really interesting, fascinating. And I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a little bit of my journey there. I just wanted to give a little opening explanation on how the labels go, what to look for. And I hope you enjoyed. And thanks so much for watching. And again, if you want to learn more, go read. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining.